In part 1, we saw how God used a church planter and a few families to plant a new church in the Security Whitefield area, and how that church grew to have a positive impact on the community. After more than 3 decades at their location on Aspen Drive, attendance started to decline, and their longtime pastor, Dallas Shafer, retired. That's when they made a crucial decision to hire a young pastor from Iowa named Bryan Myers. Bryan and his wife Diane moved to Colorado Springs in August of 1993 and brought with them their 3 young sons.
When we came to Security back in 1993, we found a church that really was kind of outdated from where it needed to be and really needed a new vision. So we tried to help with updating the church on the outside, gave it a new coat of paint, but on the inside we knew we needed a change. And so we did things like we had a special friend day. We rented a big billboard downtown on Security and Main Street that said, "You're invited to the Christian Church of Security." So people began to catch on to the vision of just reaching people in this community. And then in Whitefield, right about that time, the housing market began to boom. They were starting to build houses all over around here. A lot of people began moving in just like us, and they began looking for a church home, and they found one here.
The congregation was infused with new energy, and the church began to grow once again. Within 2 years, the Sunday attendance increased from 250 to 350 and prompted Pastor Myers to look for someone to help with the issues that came with growth. In September of 1995, Darren Rondy joined the staff as outreach pastor. The Rondys were part of a large church in Arizona and knew the issues facing growing churches.
I knew that in order for the church to go to the next level, we'd need to hire someone who had some experience at a larger church. And I remembered going to school with Darren Rondy, touched base with him, found out that he was available, and he came on staff as our church growth and outreach pastor, and we just expanded our outreach into this community.
The church continued growing 10 to 15% a year through the 1990s. With growth came additional staffing needs, which always prompted the question, can we afford it? The response of the leadership each time was, we can't afford not to. Each time the leaders took a big step toward in faith, whether it was hiring a children's director, a youth pastor, or a worship pastor, God always provided. These positions were important because of the value placed on the children's and student ministries. The congregation welcomed young people who filled the building on Sunday mornings and Sunday nights. Many gave their life to Jesus, and today, some students serve on the church staff.
So ever since I can remember, Pikes Peak Christian Church, formerly the Christian Church of Security, has been my home church. I was born during the week, and I think I was in church on the next Sunday, which I'm hugely blessed by, and I love that this is my home church and has been forever. When I was a kid, I got to experience all of the different things that the church had to offer. I graduated from high school, from Whitefield High School just down the street in 2002, and then went off to school at Ozark Christian College the next fall. And it was such a cool time in my life. I got to go with 3 other friends that were a part of our ministry here at Pikes Peak Christian Church, who also went to Ozark Christian College. And God used that time to prepare me. It was in that season that I met my wife Morgan, who also serves here on the staff. And this has been our home church since we moved back here in 2007. And we've got to raise our kids here.
During this season, 2 families heard God's calling to go to the mission field. Randy Brooks grew up in the church and attended Bible college, where he met his wife Mickey. God put in their hearts a love for the people of New Zealand, so they became part of a church plant. The Brookses now lead the church planting ministry of South Pacific Christian Fellowship. Scott and Annelle Price also heard the calling to go to the mission field.
A few years later, when I was an elder with the church, Annelle and I were trying to figure out what God was calling us to next as I was retiring out of the military. And we had a small Bible study in our home. We were writing our spiritual autobiographies, from the physical plane when we were born until that time in our life and significant things that happened. And then put on top of that our spiritual journey when we became Christians, we were born again, and then the significant events. And when Annelle and I did that, it was obvious to us in the small group that God had talked to us about missions several times in our life. And so the small group challenged us to consider doing missions. And so we researched it, and we became missionaries with Christian Missionary Fellowship. and landed in the country of Tanzania, East Africa in 1999, and we spent 18 years there.
The church added a third service and attendance grew past 600. Parking was a constant problem. If the church was to continue to grow, they had to move. But not everyone thought that bigger was a good idea.
During the summer months, we would have a church picnic out on the lawn. And the summer before we moved to the new building, one of the newer members came to my wife and she said how disappointed she was that the church was moving and becoming so big that she just didn't like what was happening. And my wife said to her, "Isn't it interesting that we like a church as long as it has room for us, but when it starts to make room for other people, we start to feel a little uncomfortable." We were going to move because God wanted us to move and make room for the people He wanted us to continue to reach.
After much prayer, the leaders knew God had bigger plans than to move to the Whittick Drive property that they had purchased earlier. They began searching for a new location for their future home and found the ideal spot on the north edge of the Fountain Valley at the corner of Hancock and Bradley Roads. The lot was perfectly situated to be both a gateway to the Fountain Valley and a launching pad for reaching into the broader Pikes Peak region.
There were many days that I spent a lot of time just walking around the property and praying for the community, praying for God even to provide us with that property.
With a major relocation on the horizon, this would allow the church to be positioned for greater impact. Yet along with those great opportunities were great challenges, including changing the name of the church. These changes would be painful but necessary in order for the church to enter into fields that were ripe for a spiritual harvest.